to our website. And we'll just get started with the first item on our agenda, which is a one map update. So this is a project that's been going on for a long time. The idea is to put all of the bike and pedestrian infrastructure in the city, the county, and UVA on a single GIS map. And Brian, you're here to give us an update from the county because the county's been doing a lot of work on this project.
Hello. Okay. Is it possible for me to do a screen share?
Should be. Give it a try.
I'm trying to figure out how. Oh, there it is. Okay. Well, so good morning. So as I said, I am doing I'm the GIS specialist at the county, and I've been asked to integrate the data layers from the three entities, from the city, the county, and UVA. This has been going on for a while, and it does feel like we kind of had to start over again, but we're in a fairly good place. What I have received is the county and UVA data, and it's all in here. We have 4 different layers. We have the bike, we have the pedestrian, we have our shared use path, and our trails. There has been a flurry of back and forth, resulting in a push as of yesterday to try to get all of the city's data. I expect it to arrive very soon, and it will also be integrated. The challenge is that the 3 entities do have somewhat different data formats, so there's been a fair amount of formatting on the back end, and how to make this available for future updates without onerous work on the part of the staff of the 3 entities. Once it's all in, the next step will be to hand it over to Chris and Drew at UVA, who will help. Actually, I need to back that up. Probably what needs to happen once all of the data is in there is then the data owners, somebody with knowledge from the county, the city, and UVA needs to take another look at it to make sure that A, it's correct, and B, you got to start figuring out how to connect at the borders, connect the lines, and then it'll be ready to go to UVA, and those folks are going to help put this into an ArcGIS online account, set that up so that it is editable, and then and then format it so that it'll be ready to develop a web map, which can be embedded in websites and apps, which then can be used on mobile devices that people can then use to navigate. So are there any questions about what we have at the moment?
I have a question, Brian. Do you know the definition difference between shared use paths and trails?
I'm not a planner, so I don't. I do appreciate that there are some differences that I don't quite understand, and that has been one of the not stumbling blocks, but speed bumps, if you will, along the way, because some of the institutions don't record different types of shared use paths in the same way, and so it's required some interpretation, sometimes on the part of people who are not the data owners, in order to get it into one of those 4 categories. Maybe another planner on the call might be able to find that. But Dan?
Yeah, I mean, this was ironed out early on in this. Shared use path is VDOT standard. It could be transportation or recreational use, but it's more of how it's made. And then trails are more unimproved, different classes, but I don't think we went into the exact background on that data, probably more in the county's data, but I don't know if all the other entities did. But trails are, for us, the county, it's purely mostly unimproved or in the park system, greenways, and shared use paths, are mostly along roadways, but depends on, again, a lot of how they were built to what standard.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you,
and-
Brian. Oh, does someone else?
And somewhat related to that, when VDOT's as we're putting together a statewide inventory, and also as I reviewed the one map data, it probably needs to be decided what is the standard nomenclature to be used. Again, you can't do the data entry until you know what you want to call everything. So again, again, not suggesting this is the way to do it, but for on-road facilities, say bike lanes, I noticed there was about 8 different types. There's cycle tracks, there's contraflow. I mean, there's a lot of different types. But what we did internally is we just started it with bicycle lane hyphen standard or a cyclo. That way, when you sort, all your bicycle lanes, or at least even if they're different types, they're at least sort in bicycle lane, and then you can differentiate with another field that actually goes into, is it a protected, is it buffered, is it standard? So there's several ways you can do it, but once you decide, you can just populate, you can attribute everything in one fell swoop, versus going in. And so again, I guess the long and the short is, it would be good to decide what you want to call these things and how you want to do it early on. That way you can clean the data up.
Are you seeing my spreadsheet here?
I am.
So this spreadsheet was passed on to me. I inherited this. This was worked out a while ago by the folks that started this project. And so this is exactly what you're talking about right here. So under these facility types, and there's a number of different types that are what are called domains in ArcGIS, so that when the data is entered, not the existing data, but when new trails are put in, there'll be a drop down, then you just select from, and it'll end up being one of these categories. So that does it does exactly what you're saying. So it limits it puts things into a certain category that makes it easy to search. So you don't have 8 different types of bikes. You have, if it's all a bike, it goes into a bike, and then you can have other subcategories underneath that. But then you can select all the bikes.
I have a question that occurs to me because on the Saunders Trail, we've been, our trail planner, trail manager, Julie is interested in coordinating better emergency response, or sort of a system that we internally could use along with fire and rescue. And I'm just curious if there's any thought as to like whether I don't know exactly the question I'm trying to ask, but how this data could be used, maybe countywide for emergency response coordination.
Dan may know more about this, but I believe my understanding is that fire rescue maintains a copy essentially of all the trail system. And in fact, in some things, they have their own data that some of us that we don't necessarily have, because they do have access points on trails that we as GIS don't necessarily maintain, because our focus is more on addressing streets. And so they do have that. I think they get a copy of every trail layer that is created, and then they actually go out and do their own GIS or GPSing so that they can have those access points.
Okay.
Yeah, just to follow up with that, I know, I think in the park systems, they do have emergency point locators, and that's coordinated with fire and rescue. I think the goal for this is an updated set for fire and rescue to have, to utilize all types of locations that users would be on within the region. Hopefully it could get to that point for having access for all data sets for, I think that's a good goal to have. I know within the county, the park system is current on that. And I also am familiar, Liz, with Julie having these conversations with fire and rescue for Monticello trails, the rustic type trails.
I might add, this is Chris. I do more for Ragged Mountain and Sugar Hollow, the more remote places. We do coordinate with county GIS, county fire rescue, and local. I've recently learned that we ought to be sharing this with Game and Fisheries and state police. because when stuff goes down, they're all deputized people that show up at some of these properties. And I don't know how they interface with Monticello Fire Station on an event like that. So Liz, you may want to also talk to, I would imagine state police for sure for Monticello and that kind of stuff, and share this data once it's all set up.
Are we going to be tracking which of these are on the property types and what the general accepted access rules are? For example, I see on there arrowhead and hedgerow trails, but I don't know if those are officially open to the public or not. And then, each location that may or may not be, like the Saunders Monticello trails, if there's time restrictions. I know some of the county parks, it's, different time restrictions based on each park, whether it's an hour after sundown or something else. So it's just something to bear in mind if this does get to the point where it's becoming a resource for other people to use, some level of understanding of when it should be used and who the primary contacts are would be great. Something to consider.
For the county, we have, I think this data is going to be ongoing on, update edits, and we initiated this whole process with having 3 type of ownership, private or easement, public with, I forget exactly the wording for that one with the easement access. But I think we could have additional, I don't know, the point that we have additional notes for closure or contact information with the website, or some type of click and you're on Monticello's information for their trails from this data. I think that that's a good direction to take this. But initial steps was just basic ownership with that.
And I think I thought at first, at least, that one map was really more transportation stuff, and that Ragged Mountain's trail system wasn't necessarily the type of data we were putting on one map, but I may have gotten confused over time with that in terms of the public base of it, and I'm still not 100% clear on that.
I think the public comments that we received on this showed. Sorry, I do have someone home from daycare today, riding his bike around the table as I'm talking. So, future user, but what was I talking about? I think outside of transportation, I think it was agreed that it should include trails and kind of have more of a regional, all-inclusive data set. I think that's the direction we went with that then.
So if I could jump in and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the place we've left it most recently is that we're still in a stage of just trying to get as much information as possible all onto one map. And then there will be that will be cleaned up, and then there will be decisions after that about which pieces will be public and what other bits need to be added to it. Dan, Brian, Amanda, does that sound accurate to you?
Right. I saw a comment about Biscuit Run. It was included or decided not to include those just yet, not being public. Those are definitely in the works, and I think once it's open, that data is in a draft mode, or those trails are in a draft mode, and yeah, I think that easily can be included. I think what might be good in this cleanup mode is to send, at least for the county, all the other RTF, Monticello, and kind of have everyone give a thumbs up with what we're representing here. We're not included. We have private in this data, but it's not going to be. It's going to be queried out, not included in what's being displayed on one map. But we have that again for fire, just for that data internally. But I think the next step might be good to, if everyone's on board with that, just to kind of have everyone be able to glance over it. I know Michael Barnes, he's involved with that. Want to give some comments with that. Even VDOT, Shane, compare it with what you guys have. I don't know if that's exactly where we're at. Brian would be able to clarify, but I think that might be helpful.
Sorry, I was just replying in the chat, but My understanding is that once we get the 3 data sets integrated and we start the cleanup, then we would probably set a timetable for updating. For maybe on a rolling basis every 6 months or a year, maybe more frequently at the beginning, and then over time once it gets settled down, maybe on an annual basis or something. And so yes, the biscuit trails will be on there once those are created and entered into our trail system, our trail layers, etc.
John, did you want to say more about your comment about using Strava and Trail for
Yeah.
date verification?
It's just, again, you guys are working off data sets from,
county
regional inventories. I think that the challenge is how do you incorporate everything? Strava heat maps is that you can use that to see what people are actually doing from biking or running, where the popular routes are. There's other sites like OpenStreetMap and Trailforks where users are crowdsourcing trails that they know of. And so, there's a whole range of trails that are available that aren't displayed here potentially, that are part of HOAs, for example, or just connections across bits that may not be represented officially. So that there's always that gray area between what's included or what's in scope, and then what people are actually using. So I don't know if that was discussed. And I know that you're working on getting the university's data set in there, because I noticed some of the trails the university has aren't there, like around Fox Haven and Boar's Head. Anyhow, I'm super excited by this. I'm a map guy. I love staring at maps and updating the stuff, and having some sort of single resource to go to and leverage would be fantastic. So
I just wanted to comment on the Strava. I mean, the county's region or rural areas outside of our development areas and park systems, that was a process that we to gather data through Strava for the 2019 bike ped plan for rural recommendations. So it was a very, like you said, you described it well. We just kind of took popular routes. It's not every gravel road recommend, it was just where we see people are riding for any type of future bike accommodation with VDOTs, routine pavings. As long as we have it called out in this, we could identify some type of signage or some type of improvement towards that. So it is a general rural identification where people are riding.
excellent. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments regarding One Map?
Hey, I'm so sorry. It's Michael Barnes here. I apologize for going in late. What's the timeline for the next sort of iteration?
We're anticipating the rest of the city data literally at any minute, is what I was told yesterday. And once it's in, I will import them into the 4 features. And at that point, the next task would be to do, I guess each of the entities would need to do a quick survey to make sure that their data is in there correctly. Then we would need to, we would need to figure out who is going to do the actual, what do you call the data cleanup, making sure the lines connect at the boundaries of the 3 entities. And that might take some time depending. My thought is that this summer we will have, I'll be working with the Scholars Lab at UVA to set up the AGOL account. That's it, ArcGIS Online. And from there, I would like to think we would have that done by the next, this next meeting. I guess, is it a quarterly meeting or a monthly? Jessica, are these quarterly or monthly meetings?
Sorry, these are monthly meetings, although sometimes we skip a month.
We could potentially have it, well, I don't know, I can't speak for the AGOL account. We should have the city data definitely by the next meeting, and getting the AGOL account set up and start with the data, the final data cleanup. We're snapping the lines together at the boundaries. That might take a little bit longer. that will depend on the time and availability of the staff at the Scholars Lab over at UVA. Given that it's the summer, they may be involved in field work. So unfortunately, that might get pushed a little bit later into early fall.
Thank you.
And Brian just has an open invitation to keep coming back to these meetings and updating us as he can.
Sure.
So, all right, any other questions or comments on One Map? Great. Okay, so we'll move into our next agenda item. So thank you so much, Brian. Our next agenda item is transportation alternatives applications. So this funding source for bike ped projects has a pre-application date coming up right around the corner. Some of those projects are already asking for resolutions of support from the PDC or the MPO policy board and the localities. So I just wanted to give people a chance to talk about the projects that their locality is working on, and people can ask questions as they wish. So Chris, did you want to go first? Did you want to talk about your TAP project?
Sure. We are submitting, we currently have one open TAP grant at the Rugby Avenue project, which we hope to go to bid soon. Then we have another TAP grant we got 2, maybe 3 years ago for one of the bridges we've needed over the Meadow Creek Valley over behind the Pepsi plant and the old senior center area. That's a $375,000 grant for design and construction. Well, we've decided we need a lot more construction to really make that bridge connect to the various public streets, Mickey Drive, Greenbrier Drive, over to Brandywine. So we are submitting for an extra something like 650 total range of new money to add to the 375 so that we can not only build the bridge we need, but also the Stone Dust Trail system to connect all those points. What we're calling the flux capacitor trail. It's got the bridge in the middle and these 3 things that shoot off on either direction. We have a line and grade under contract now. They're already doing the design work. So our pre-app goes in soon. We have some discussions with the county who might contribute some funding. They'll know in August. That might add some more money to the pot. And we're in discussions with the local quarry about how they might do an in-kind match with the gravel and stone dust to further up the dollar amount on the grant. So our October final app might be a higher dollar amount than our pre-app. I'm going to word that in the pre-app somehow to see. I'll talk to Michael about that. The more the better. We get this whole thing built. We have had other projects where we underestimated the cost of construction and found ourselves at shortfall, and that we're trying to avoid doing that this time with better cost estimating and design upfront.
Any questions for Chris? Amanda, I don't know if you want to try speaking to us or if you wanted to talk about Safe Routes to School TAP application in the chat. If you're talking, we still can't hear you. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. So if you want to just really briefly talk about that in the chat, that would be helpful. And then I'm going to ask Sandy to talk about a TAP application that the PDC is assisting Nelson County with. This is a sidewalk project, primarily a sidewalk project on Front Street in Livingston.
Yeah, while I'm doing that, Jessica, if you want to post a link to the policy board packet for June, there is a memo and a resolution that describes the Safe Routes to School TAP application that Amanda has prepared. So that might be a good way to at least summarize the project if Amanda isn't able to jump on to explain it. But we've been working with the TJPDC, worked with Nelson County to do an economic revitalization plan through CDBG for the Livingston area in Nelson County. And so out of that, they identified some opportunities. Sorry, I have multiple alerts happening at one time. They identified some opportunities to do some sidewalk improvements to develop better sidewalk connectivity through the Livingston area, connecting to some of the businesses, that kind of thing. So we have been working with a design engineering firm and VDOT to develop a application to do some of that through TAP. There are a lot of questions just about there are a lot of costs related to stormwater because it is in a neighborhood area. There's a lot of infrastructure that we have to navigate. So we're working through that. We're going to break it up into 2 sides of the street. So the first phase will be to do all of the engineering and then construct the west side for the block of the road that we're looking at, and then potentially look into a second phase later. And we're also looking at other opportunities to where we can leverage TAP with additional funding through CDBG or potentially maybe augment with a smart scale application. So we're just really trying to be open about leveraging as many funding opportunities as possible for Nelson County.
Any questions for Sandy? And I did post the link to the policy board meeting, which is the 23rd, if people want to attend that and hear more about these projects, as well as some other interesting things. And Amanda has posted a little bit of information in the chat as well, if you want to look at the Safe Routes to School stuff there. I believe that's all of the TAP projects. Did I miss anything from anyone? Or Michael, did you want to speak about anything? Nope. Okay, great. So we'll move into our last item on the agenda, or second to last item really, because we'll have roundtable at the end, our bike and ped count. So I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see the final results, or the almost final results. Hold on one second. All right. So we tried to do our bike and ped count at the same 10 locations in the last 2 weeks of April for the spring. We had done these same 10 locations back in the fall. We weren't able to get enough volunteers to do all of those locations in those last 2 weeks of April. So we've been finishing those up with staff involvement over the last month, really. And we still have 2 to go. Unfortunately, those were ones along Rio Road at the Parkway and at Penn Park Road. So what we have, and this spreadsheet will be posted on our website, much like we did with the fall results. So you'll be able to download this Excel spreadsheet, which not only includes the grand totals, it includes very specific information for all of the it includes very specific information for all of the count locations. So as you can see here, this is just an example from the Emmett and Ivy intersection. You can look at it all, based on 15-minute increments and from which direction each of the bicyclists and pedestrians was coming from. It also includes all the demographic information about, how many women and children and all that stuff, how many wrong-way riders, as well as how many motorized bikes or like electric bikes were included or noticed by the counters. I think our takeaways for this are that we needed to spend a little bit more time searching for volunteers. We ended up getting some really great volunteers. I think Stephen and Kath, I think you were both volunteers, and I really appreciate your efforts. But about half of these counts had to be done by staff. So either we'll spend more time looking for volunteers next time around, or we'll cut down on our locations. So just trying to maximize the time we have available for a project like this in the future. So any questions or comments? And like I said, all of this info will be available on our site. It'll be downloadable. So if people want to play with the numbers, this information will all be there. Okay. Lastly, we'll move into our roundtable updates. Let's see. Dan, are you still around? Yes, Dan, did you want to talk about updates from the county? You're on mute.
Yeah, just saw that. Let's see here. Yeah, we don't have a TA application this year. I think discussion, as Chris mentioned earlier, was more for the Parks and Rec For transportation, no. But we're looking at, for revenue sharing, we have Eastern Avenue that we're applying, filling out our pre-app for, and we have, and from the Avon corridor study, we have a connection, a shared use path connection there that we're looking for on our to do a pre-app for, and that would be from Mill Creek to the the National Guard area for a shared use path improvement along there. So that's what's on our radar for the county. If anyone had any questions.
Thanks, Dan. All right, and Chris, we'll get to you next, but before you, let's point to Liz. Liz was going to give some announcement on the Old Mills Trail.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I switched my headphones. So a few months ago, Monticello applied for a Virginia Outdoors Foundation grant for assistance with acquiring a section of the future Old Mills Trail expansion that is kind of sandwiched between two pieces of Monticello property. It's a parcel known as South Lego, and I'm pleased to say that we were awarded that grant from VOF. They announced it on the 10th, I think. And so I think Tim Padalino might have included this. Well, I know he did include the update on the future Mills, Old Mills Trail expansion in a recent report to Board of Supervisors. And in that time since, we were also awarded funding to help with that right-of-way acquisition. So we're excited to have continuing conversation with the county about that project and hopeful that the board will support it.
Great, thanks, Liz. All right, any questions for Liz? Comments? All right, we'll go ahead to Chris.
I'm mostly working to get the Rugby Avenue project to bid and construction. We've been twiddling with that one for quite too long. That's going to go to construction, we hope soon, as well as the bicycle ramp / ADA connection from Madison Avenue West to Madison Avenue East, I guess you'd call it, through the Washington Park right of way. I'm interested to see, I don't know if we discussed it, but if the Ravenna River Bridge study, if that's going to go forward as a smart scale, I'm really excited to see that project moving forward, whatever that next phase might be, with the way Woollen Mills has come together and all the action on the river and the piece at Old Mills and the Monticello connection, that bridge as part of the 3-notch trail system statewide, that's going to be a really neat piece to get in place. So I'm excited to see that. And starting to strategize for what our next round of smart scale TAP revenue sharing and those kind of things might be. Dan, we're on course to, or the county's on course to build the Old Lynchburg sidewalk Azalea Park piece in the near future. Is that?
Yeah, that's the original consultant that looked at it. We had them, they're reevaluating it, looking at the costs. We, again, the full funding of that did not come through for, what was it? It was TAP last round. So then the county decided to look into not the Greenway portion on Morris Creek, but rather the sidewalk connection on Old Lynchburg. I just got I think an update on it, but last I have seen was we're reevaluating the cost estimate on that. So
okay, great.
I was going to ask you, Chris, was we went to the board for the county. They're definitely supportive of the Ravenna River crossing being a application for smart scale. We mentioned that in our report as a future application. Where's the city on this?
I'm not sure. I'm just now beginning to interface myself as a parks person into how the city does smart scale. Most of that's through neighborhood development and I guess like engineering and traffic. So Amanda might know. And then there's the PDC does smart scale stuff too. And I'm not sure where that bridge project sits in that world, but I'm hoping to get the Trails and Parks Department into that world soon. That's my update, Jessica.
Thanks, Chris. Sandy, did you want to pop in with some smart scale info?
Yeah, for those of you who don't follow the MPO processes, the MPO has started a smart scale selection process pretty early. So we've identified several potential opportunities. We meaning Charlottesville, Albemarle, MPO staff meeting with VDOT and the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County planning departments and engineering departments to figure out, or public works, I guess, to figure out what the opportunities are to develop support for applications that will have public engagement early on. So we're going to be discussing what the potential project list of project options are at our upcoming meeting on June 23rd. And one of those is the Ravenna River bike and pedestrian crossing that's been discussed. That's going to be one of the options. The other two options that we're looking at that have really strong multimodal components are looking at the Avon Street corridor and then looking at the 5th Street corridor. And looking at the plans that have recently been developed along with recommendations in the city of Charlottesville's bike and pedestrian master plan to potentially, if these projects are selected, to potentially develop a series of applications out of those corridor studies. So at the next meeting on June 23rd, we're just presenting the project options. And then in July, we're going to be asking the MPO policy board to identify which applications they want us to move forward with pursuing. And two of those applications or two of those projects could involve a higher level of public or stakeholder engagement. So that doesn't necessarily translate to the number of projects. So for example, the policy board could pick up a project in the hydraulic 29 area. They could pick up the bike and pedestrian project, the bike and pedestrian bridge crossing. And then they could tell us that they either want to focus on the entire corridor of Avon or the entire 5th Street corridor and develop more than one application out of those. So we're going to be having that preliminary discussion this upcoming month. And then in July, the policy board will be giving us some direction. Once they select their projects, we'll be able to determine what our next steps are going to be for public engagement out of the projects that they identify as being their priorities.
Sandy, any questions?
We've got, once I talk more with the city and how to, the completion of the 250 bypass trail system over by hydraulic and potentially from Park Street down to the Ravenna River would be a target project in my mind for smart scale. I'm just not sure if that's this coming selection round or if that goes to the next one, given what's already on the table. But if they do pick up the hydraulic piece, I think the shared use path would be a part of that. So I'll let you know what I find out. And again, it might be that either the city or the PDC in the next round of smart scale, we could get this entire 250 thing done from across the entire city. We've got all these parts and pieces, and once we snap them all together, that'll be a really good functional commuting trail.
Sandy, it's Michael Barnes here. Just out of curiosity, the Avon corridor, recognizing that Avon has kind of got a lot of constrictions on the street itself. I mean, especially in the city, it's not a lot of right away to sort of connect to downtown. Will this study look at some of the sort of potential sort of parallel systems? I mean, I know, like 6th Street or Meridian and Belmont offer opportunities to sort of get that north-south connection that maybe is not on Avon, or do you think that this study will be pretty much looking at that street solely?
My suspicion is that maybe Amanda might be in a better position to correct me. So we might have to follow up with Amanda later. My suspicion is that we would look at that corridor as a whole and look at what recommendations are already in place that will relieve any sort of pressures on that corridor, whether that's doing improvements directly on that corridor or doing things that will improve safety on that corridor somewhere else. I think all options are on the table going into it. And then part of the engagement process, if that corridor is identified as being one of the applications that the policy board wants us to work on developing, we would really just have to start with everything's on the table and go through a process of identifying what's going to have the most benefit, meeting the highest priorities for both the county and the city throughout that area. I mean, honestly, this is a new process that we've gone through. So, you know, I would love to tell you this is exactly what's going to happen, but I think we have to go through the process to figure out, you know, what the potential results of it are going to be. And we'll have a lot more, a lot better of an understanding of what that will, you know, what will come out of it once we get started having those discussions.
Great. I want to direct people to the chat to see some pretty detailed information from Amanda at the city, specifically about design plans for the Preston Barracks project. So you can take a look at that, but I won't read it out loud. You can just read it yourselves. Chuck, do you want to give us any updates?
Basically, we're working through some of the studies we've got going on in the area, not so much in the MPO area. I know we're looking at a study of Pantops 250 and Pantops from Hanson's Road down to the interchange, which is the part that we didn't get funded with Smart Scale last round. We're also looking at the intersection in Shadwell at 250 and 22 and 250 and 729 North Milton Road. So we're going to look at that as those two projects, studying them this coming year for possible smart scale applications next round. Other than that, we're just going to provide assistance to the localities and the MPO on their studies that they're pursuing moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Chuck.
That's pretty much it.
Great. Shane, did you want to give us any updates?
I don't have anything specific, but I'll be happy to take any questions you guys may have. As Chuck said, we're getting ready to, there'll be a new round of studies kicking off for Project Pipeline to feed Smart Scale. But that's just a general process, and with the goal of having most things done by next March in advance of applications. So should be quite a few studies going on here in the next year or less than a year.
Great. That's exciting. Thanks, Shane. Before we get into some updates from Sarah and Rideshare, and John, if you want to give us some updates from Cambic, I just wanted to note John's question about gravel roads being recreational resources and influencing their paving priorities. We have talked about this before. Dan has done a really good job of going over this, but I'll let him, say a few words to sum that up for us.
Good, John. Just clarify what you're asking about decreasing the priority, I guess.
Yeah, decreasing. Certainly for the more popular routes that runners and bikers use, the gravel. There's always fear that when it gets paved, cars drive faster, and now you're taking one less. You're taking one road out of the mix for safe places to go as a recreational resource. So, and just looking, I know this has been topicked elsewhere. I just wonder if it's, I haven't heard what the county's response to that is. So I may be out of touch and can catch up offline, Dan.
No, I'm fine with that. I could give a quick update. This has definitely been a hot topic this spring with our rural road paving, which is the secondary 6-year plan. 4 roads are going to the board July 7th to be paved. They went through the whole petition process. They're in the secondary 6-year plan, and a lot of feedback on this. So it went from a consent item to a discussion item. So I did what I could. I referenced both opposition and support in my reports. I mentioned the concern for these gravel roads to be paved. They're utilized as greenways of sorts in the rural areas. But again, these roads are petitioned by property owners, and then the board decides which roads get paved. So in my coordination, I do believe I'm representing both sides of it. I also know that I can further dive into gravel routes that are represented on, I forget what website it is, and kind of overlay that information on what is in our secondary 6-year plan, what also is on our priority list. So roads that are not on the secondary 6-year plan, but are petitioned and are waiting to get paved. So I'm not sure how they overlap yet. That could be a little, I could dive into that further. That would probably be more included in next year's round. That would be good information to have. But again, I feel like just in summary, these roads are petitioned by property owners. The boards decide to support it or not. And this will be going to, these specific roads will be designated July 7th. That is Red Hill School Road, Hammocks Gap Road, Burnt Mill Road, and Harris Creek Road. So they're spread all through the county, some dead ends, but I know this is of interest, and I definitely think it's good to keep this information in this group as well.
Thanks, Tim.
Great. John, did you want to give us a Cambic update?
Sure. We've been working with the city in Hedgerow, helping build out, and Cambic membership has helped fund a lot of the build out of some trails, newer trails in Hedgerow, which has been a great partnership on increasing the trail system there. I know we're hopeful that we can work with, in conjunction with the RTF and the UVA Foundation and Birdwood. There's an opportunity there to come up with a long-term vision for trail interconnectivity in that whole western area that we'd love to participate in and evangelize, if you will, to try and increase the amount of the ability for students to get to Boar's Head really without having to get in a car, but also to address the Ragged Mountain the Reservoir Road that is soon to be paved. It's difficult for people to get out there. There's a lot more traffic given the popularity of the Ragged Mountain Reservoir and the trail systems. Where can people park safely without having to use that road and still get access to those trails? So we're really interested and focused on looking at alternatives there to make it safer to get to the trail system. We're also working in partnership with the county in future planning around Biscuit and looking at trail options and how can we help get it ready for the public, and focus on, as part of the plan, the original plan that was approved by the board, there were some dedicated mountain bike areas within the park that we're looking at what we can do and how we can raise funding to accelerate that, to have something ready when it's open for the public. Other than that, it's weed season. So we're trying to work with the RTF and us and keep the trails open. It's getting pretty thick out there, and it just takes, it's a labor of love with all the volunteers and coordinating with the city and the county to keep them open so people can use the trails.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, did you want to give an update from rideshare?
Not too terribly much to update at this moment. We are just kind of finishing out the rest of the fiscal year with rideshare, finishing the last of our park and ride inventory. Did have some nice promotions for Bike Month through the state, and that we did through our social media accounts. But yeah, just kind of in that year-end wrap.
Thanks, Sarah. Chris posted a question in the chat about Zion Crossroads. Sandy answered that question in the chat, but Sandy, did you want to say anything else?
No, we're just, we've been doing a small area plan for Zion Crossroads that includes it's predominantly a transportation analysis of the corridor. So one of the things that we talked about recently was specifically bike facilities that will provide both a potential regional connection for a 3-notch trail to go through the area, but could also be used locally for travel within the area, specifically from people that might be traveling, from their homes to go to work at one of the industrial parks or something like that. So we have identified some bicycle and pedestrian facilities that we think could potentially provide a backbone of that network moving forward. So I think our timeline, I'm not exactly sure at this point when that plan will wrap up, but hopefully in the fall at some point, we'll have some final recommendations.
Cool, thanks. We had a really good meeting with Goochland about 3-notch, so we're kind of Fluvanna being the middle piece, looking at the technical pieces and parts of that. And then I guess real quick, Jessica, if I could, before you move on with John speaking earlier, I don't know if you guys all saw, we got a number of local breweries to start sponsoring a donations through June for Outdoors Month and National Trails Month. That money's going to the Ravenna Trails Foundation, and 3-notch is a subsidiary of that, but we're looking to do more and more of that over the years for Cambic, Bike Month, all that sorts of things. They were so quick to jump on. I think next year we can get a whole lot more of them, and they're just passing through money from their customers into the nonprofits that help support our trail system around the area.
Great. I do notice that Bill from UVA just joined us, and I'm going to give him a minute to get his bearings, and then I'm going to ask him to give us updates from UVA if he has any. But otherwise, we've really finished all of the agenda items. We have gotten updates from anyone. Are there any other comments, questions, including from members of the public? All right. Bill, do you want to give us any UVA updates?
I don't really have any bike ped updates. I know, from a transit standpoint, the bus routing and stuff is still being evaluated for the fall, and they'll probably make some decisions this summer. And, that'll probably, some dominoes will fall there in terms of like bike parking on grounds and where we concentrate some of that stuff, or have opportunities to improve pedestrian conditions elsewhere, maybe along McCormick Road. But yeah, I can't really think of anything beyond that right now that would be of interest. So
great. Well, thanks for joining us for this little bit of time.
Sorry I'm late. I just had a meeting that went way over. So
no worries. Did you want to say anything else about any of the other topics? We also talked about the one map. Brian gave us a really good update. We talked about TAP. We talked about the bike count. Any other comments or questions?
I guess one thing is, another thing that we might be able to integrate into the one map stuff eventually is we have a person in parking transportation who's kind of undertaking to better locate and catalog and update our like bike racks and other bike infrastructure around grounds. So that'll be a nice kind of solid data set we'll have hopefully by the end of the summer. We have a lot of racks, and a lot of them kind of move around once because they're movable. Though we're getting away from that. So he's doing a good inventory of those, and I think that'll be useful.
Great. Is that Patrick?
Yeah, Patrick. Right.
Great.
Exactly.
Well, I think he is on this email list, so hopefully we'll get him at a future meeting to chat about that. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, everyone, I want to give one more opportunity if anyone has comments or questions.
I just have a quick, I just want to say, I think in my recap or summary of the Eastern Avenue application, I just want to emphasize that, yes, it's Crozet. Crozet's, I don't want to leave Crozet out, but this connection would, this pre-app, this application, it would improve sidewalks, bike lanes, and the county is currently building the sidewalk connection in front of Harris Teeter there. So it really would provide access, bicycle and pedestrian access. So that's the goal of the application. I want to emphasize that.
Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you in July. Have a good rest of your day.